It's a long way home, thinking about that city of charm.
Welcome to the Iprograms Podcast, The Art of Program Management, a podcast navigating the complex world of program and project management. I'm Virginia Scheuer, your co-host, along with Dr. Bill Bersing, president of Iprograms. Each episode brings you insights, strategies, and interviews with top leaders in the field. Today's episode, I'll be interviewing our very own Dr. Bill Bersing. With a remarkable 30-year career, Dr. Bill specializes in construction scheduling, cost control, and construction management information systems. He's managed large-scale programs across the globe from U.S. to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Join us as we explore the first 5 of the 10 most challenging aspects of program management. Drawing from Dr. Bill's extensive experience and expertise, you'll discover valuable insights and strategies to elevate your program management skills. You won't want to miss it. So are you ready? Let's do this. All right. So today we have our CEO here, Dr. Bill Bersing, who is at the helm of shaping how we tackle program complexities. Welcome, Dr. Bill. We would love for you to introduce yourself and also talk about what we are going to be tackling today.
Thanks, Virginia. I think it's probably good for me to introduce myself. I've worked in industry for many years now and developed and started IPS Corporation PC back in 2003 when I was in Naples, Italy. And you remember Naples, you visited me there a few times, but that was a pretty long time ago. Since then, I've worked with other companies, but recently, right before 2019 and the COVID epidemic, I focused on IPS Corporation full time. So IPS stands for the Institute for Program Solutions, based on some of the research that I did. A lot of my research is on qualitative research in the engineering service industry. And it's grounded studies I've done. So this podcast will help spur that along and hopefully coming up with the 10 challenges. And then hopefully every week we'll come out with either what we call a newsletter or whatever we want to post on LinkedIn to be able to support the writings that I plan on doing now that I have a little bit more time in the future. All right, so I'd just like to add that we've been successful doing our value management or scheduling training or some of the project management training sessions with introducing subject matter experts. So as we go on, as we start talking about this, we're going to gather some of we have a board of advisors in IPS, basically good friends that I've had throughout the years who are really experts at some of these subjects. So we're going to hopefully interview them as well and get their input and insight on program management. I've been in the business a while, but I think gathering that information and talking to experts that are good with the different topics is extremely important.
Absolutely. So what are the 5 major program complexities that you see?
For me, there's a lot of complexities when it comes to managing a program versus a project. Projects are managed in a certain way, and sometimes you take the tools that you have and use this to manage your projects the same way as you manage a program, or a small project. But the complexities are very unique with programs. We have to manage it in a way that you have to sometimes step aside and say, hey, what are the qualitative things? What are the quantitative things that we can get into? Talk about that a little bit more, but even starting up a project versus a program is different as well.
Okay. Can you talk to us about the challenges that people may face when starting a program?
It's one of them is a clear and consistent communication channel. Then, of course, there's regular updates and reporting. That's always a challenge. Stakeholder engagement, many technology challenges and the use of technology, the use of databases. There's qualitative, and again, there's quantitative databases, but the qualitative things are very important as well. And then effective meetings and management of these meetings and how you become not just effective, but a high energy team to be able to manage the project. For the clear and consistent communication channels that we mentioned before, You got to figure it out what it is, what emails that you're using, what kind of emails, what is the software you're using, what kind of meetings are you going to have, as well as the communication and what your stakeholders want. And then, of course, this all relies on the accurate information and the information you have on hand. At the beginning, you need different people, you need different resources. You need people who are very familiar with the design efforts. I believe, as we've always stated in our industry with construction management, we need to involve the construction management team early on, because it's shown historically that you'll save a lot more money if you get those people on at the beginning. And then once you get into the construction, then you have all the different things involved in the construction, and with the different change orders and stakeholder involvement, communication, with the different challenges with managing the communication. A lot of that is virtual now, but face-to-face meetings are extremely important at the beginning of these projects. And each stage, and I think that in the future, we'll write some papers or we'll do some things and have discussions with subject matter experts on some of this, but those tie-ins between design and construction and let's say like 50%, 80%, then you get to the red zone. All of those stages within the design to the construction and throughout the construction to the actual ending of the project. And then when you end, especially with these programs, you're going to hand off all your documentation to the operation and maintenance team, or the people who are maintaining the building. And that's a handoff that you can't just say, here it is, here's some drawings, I've seen it happen. And you have to be very coordinated. Again, when you do this, I believe you just need to have stakeholder involvement, a lot of it, meaning everybody on the team. Put your heads around who it is. I always begin with a communication survey, just to find out how people like to communicate. And that survey doesn't just say, okay, here's the beginning, this is how we're going to do it, and then you start doing it. If people change, then you need to realize and figure out, if whoever it is, your customer, whoever the end user is, if they change, you need to find out what the new person would like to, how they would like to communicate. Do they like to have meetings every month or every week, or do they like to see a daily update from the program manager or their program management team? Do they like to have the bullet points? Do they like, there are just so many aspects of this with qualitative and quantitative type approaches to all this, so that has to be really thought through on every stage of the project.
Do you find that some don't even know their own communication style?
I find they don't, and then once you start asking them questions and digging down, and then working with them for a couple of weeks, you got to work with them face to face. It's
Sure.
The whole virtual thing works. Yeah, it's great. You and I are on this virtually. You're in another location, but the fact is, when we're working together, we need to make sure that we understand each other, and it's hard to do that when you're doing the virtual. You can do it, I guess you can do it, but trust and a lot of things that are shown that you work face to face, you can develop that trusting relationship a lot quicker than you can when you're doing something virtually.
Absolutely.
Especially when you're doing these virtual calls and you don't even see the person.
Right.
You don't see the person, that's the problem.
Exactly. What are some questions you would ask somebody to understand what their communication style is for a project? If I were to come into the project, how would you assess me, and how could I assess myself on what kind of communication I like?
Yeah, no, the survey that has, it's one of these standard things, and I think, and work for Jacobs and I work with AECOM, they all have these kind of standard surveys, and they're
Sure.
all basically the same. Hey, how do you like do you like email? Do you like text? Do you like, Teams versus some other application? How do you like me to call you? Can I call you after hours? Can I, if something comes up, do you want to know about it, or do you want me to handle it with my team?
Right.
Something came up recently where this one guy, customer, he's like, hey, Bill, what happened? I'm like, I explained the situation, but he didn't find out until that evening. And his expectation, I didn't know it at the time. He needed to find out right when it happened.
Right.
But we were taking care of it. We had it resolved within 24 hours. Everything was good. The electricity was turned back on.
Yeah, that's important to know for yourself as you're going into a project, and making it clear too to the people around you on how you like to be communicated with.
Let me just add that, it's not just clear and concise communication. It's really regular updates when it comes to this, and then stakeholder engagement. The second question is
stakeholder engagement. Can you talk about that? What kind of engagement is required for these programs?
Well, again, that's nothing's really required for any of these things. You ask me, having been involved for 30 years in these programs and projects, you got to get stakeholder involvement, but sometimes they don't. They don't really. They inform them sporadically. They're not engaged in the contract, in the construction project itself. Having these bi-weekly and even weekly, maybe monthly meetings or quarterly meetings with your stakeholders. These are the people, either lab owners, the people that are using the facility, or whatever command you're working on, whether it's Army or Navy or whatever. You gotta make sure that everybody's involved.
Why?
Well, they need to be involved in the project status, the updating the tasks, the potential issues and changes. You ask why? Because who's paying for this? The stakeholders are the ones at the end of the day that's coming out of their pockets usually. And when you say stakeholders, it can be the construction contractor, it can be the designer record, it can be the design build company, it could be the subcontractors that are paying a major part of it, the CM company. It's, you talk about who it is, stakeholders can be everybody.
Right. And having them involved means more hands in the pot. And so is there some resistance to having be in communication with everybody? Or do you think that it's just a time thing where people don't necessarily let get their stakeholders engaged?
So why do you think people are involved in putting their hands in the pot?
Yeah.
Because they're not engaged. If they were engaged and they understand that, hey, you can trust us, we're doing the right thing, we're making the right decisions, and we're going to let you know how this goes, then, if we're going to shut down your lab, or we're going to shut down your building or whatever room you're in, they need to know that we're telling them about it, and that here's the schedule and here's our plan of action.
It keeps everybody happy as well as involved and invested in the project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I can also imagine that it'd be important for those unforeseen risks.
You can go on and on about how unforeseen risks, and I read some notes, and I could probably write, papers on this. We've provided risk management assessments. We've done risk analysis and planning before, but it's on these larger programs, and in some of the projects that are big, you need to make sure that that they come in intervals, regular intervals. Whether they're there, it's got to be structured. Again, the stakeholders all have to be involved. They have to understand what the risks are, how you're doing it. What we call it, the strength, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. That SWOT analysis that we can do. And there's a couple other things that you can do as well. I've been asked by a couple of senior managers of large, $60 billion construction programs for information on risk assessment and their spreadsheets and this and that. We've also done some of this as well, but you have to have the right person, right personality to be able to, kind of like what your personality is. It's good, it's open, you understand what it is that people are talking about. You can take notes very quickly. You can understand and ascertain what the risks are. And then once you have a group of lists, then we usually say, okay, what's the percentage of this ever happening? 100%, 2%, 5%, 75%. And then you go through whatever, sometimes we have hundreds of risks that we're analyzing.
Wow.
And you group them together and you say, well, Jack's going to take care of this because he's the scheduler, or, AJ's going to do this because he's the commissioning guy, or somebody's going to do this because, their expertise lies in that. And then they form a group of people that actually manage it. And then the next month or next quarter, you talk about it with your customers and you say, this is what we came up with. This is a risk because of COVID. Thank God we had this thing developed during COVID, and we continue doing it after COVID, because if we had not have had that on some of the programs I've been working on, it gets painful.
This is something that relieves stress levels in the overall scheme of things in the project.
Yeah.
It
was, I don't know, I guess I could mention this. I'm the board of trustees for Randolph-Macon Academy. It's a high school, prep school. And, And we had I can't say it's a risk assessment, but we bought Macintoshes. We got prepared before COVID. Nobody knew it was happening, but once it happened, it's like, wow, everybody's can just go home, including the teachers. Within a day, they came home. They had their Macs, they had everything, and that's just a good case for risk.
Absolutely.
And then in the construction world, it's the same. I mean, we've done things, prepare ourselves for an influx of things like inflation, and how are we going to prepare for, we know that these transformers, or we know that this equipment's going to be outrageously expensive, and we have a change order, and we have to do this, and we have to order it. How are we going to mitigate the time impact? Think about, and it's not always the contractor thinking about it too. It's us as a team to think about it together. And if you just push it off on the contractor, you're going to see a lot of delays and a lot of claims at the end, and you're going to deal with this for years to come, based on my experience.
Yeah, and your contractors have enough to do.
Yeah. Yeah, but got to be flexible on your project management, the way your methodology of what you're doing. You can't just, especially with the risk assessment, you can't just kind of go in and say, hey, this is the way we're doing it. Right. And the communication and reporting systems for this type of risk assessment is very important as well.
Yes. I can see how each one of these challenges that we're going over depends. They are interdependent. They're not just separate challenges, because we have the effective communication and team management that has to go along with the unforeseen risks. If you're tackling unforeseen risks, you have to have the clear communication. Right. And what about boundaries?
Yeah, no, even with the boundaries, and it kind of ties into the last subject, you have to have ownership of their processes and procedures. And that's something that we do at Iprograms very well, as we've implemented on large programs a lot of really good processes and procedures on different things. But knowing your boundaries, understanding what it is, ensures that the stakeholders in the team understand what is in their scope. I mean, we're not maintaining the building. We're not operating the building specifically, but we have some involvement. So what are your boundaries? We were talking before about, here's your project. Here we're construction. We're going to turn it over. We have our certification of occupancy. We're going to give it to the operation and maintenance team. We give it to them, but our boundaries aren't to maintain that building. Our boundaries are here, and we have to maintain that. That's just kind of a small example of what it is. And there's this detailed scope. If we have a design build versus design bid build, design bid build is easier because we have construction documents 100% issued for construction, and they're given to the contractor, and they bid on them, and everybody's almost happy about what's going on. But we have to understand that, versus the design build, where the designer record is building it from scratch and coming up, and then they hand it over to construction. So with that detailed scope of work and the documentation, not only it's important to know, but it's important to know where to go to get it to it. I've been involved in a couple of these larger programs that are 4, 5, 6 years. One in Qatar, that you got to know what it is that we're doing. And I was involved in the Qatar Railway major station education city, and that was huge as a claims expert. But when I went in, we had a whole team there, and they were managing the project. But you gotta be able to take somebody like myself who came in there to analyze and look at a thing and give them the scope of work, give them the boundaries that you are, not just make them guess, or not just assume that they know everything about the program or the project. That's extremely important. And then stakeholder mapping, within that, it gets a little convoluted, but the mapping and analysis with the boundaries is also important, because you don't want to kind of go over that. Sometimes with some of the military organizations, you have a hierarchical step, and you don't want to step on somebody's toes, and you just have to figure out where you are.
Right. I could see us doing a whole episode on boundaries. That would be great.
It is, and it's in management. And when I did my doctoral stuff, it was a big topic. I wrote some papers on it, and not many people really understand the importance of both knowing your significance and what your program and project is, and what you're doing at the end, and your boundaries. And you tie those two in, and you understand what your significance is, how are you going to improve the world around you, or what your mission and goal is for this particular project or program, but also what are your boundaries? I mean, you're not going to solve the world's hunger. You're not going to do some of these things, and that's kind of it in a nutshell. And I guess we could talk about that.
Sure. Staying streamlined on what your mission and what your focus is on that project, and not, bird walking.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It's
great.
something I guess you learn in high school. I have kids, teenagers who really understand it, and I don't know where they got it. They understand where their boundaries are because they're in school and they have to do this stuff, and they're not going off and doing other things. They're just doing what they need to do to get good grades and be successful at that young age. But if you don't learn it at a young age, it's hard.
Yes.
If you don't start this program or project off at the beginning with good, clear, concise boundaries, then it's off. We're not doing operation and maintenance. There's different skill sets involved in hiring program managers.
I think
they call it long lead technology versus mediating technology. Some of the environmental engineers, environmental scientists, and operation and maintenance people, they're in kind of the mediating. They're looking at, hey, here's every little detail. This is what we need day to day. It's like you got like a 500,000 checklist, boom, 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 versus managing a program where you have to look at your long lead, the technologies. Things don't happen every day. They happen years to come, and it's two different mindsets, two different ways of approaching management itself.
Right. And I think that brings us right into early risk management. It's not about, in what you were talking about was like the present moment, hitting what they need to get done, getting that done, managing it right there in the moment. And this is what you're talking about is early risk management, early management in general. Can you talk about that challenge of early risk management?
A program we've been working on for a few years here. And because we were very proactive in measuring significant impacts on the project and our concerns before COVID and then during COVID, and we tracked it with an outside organization, not IPS or Iprograms, but another company. We were doing some of the work with another company. But because of that, the team was able to identify some of the things that would happen during a COVID and shutting things down, and what things would happen after we shut it down, after closing up. We worked virtually as a team. And all that didn't totally relate to the risk, but as we got going and as we started working remotely and as we started coming off of COVID, we were able to identify a lot more of the risk, a lot more of, hey, these people aren't going to come back right away, or we're not going to be able to get all this equipment. And when you're managing a large design build project, it's like, man, you got to figure this stuff out, and you got to figure it out quickly, because as the customer's representative and managing the program, you're not just going to let the contractor just say, hey, it's everything. And the contractor doesn't want to do that. They want to work with you. They want to figure it out. They want to give you a good product. They want you to be pleased with their product. They don't want to have this hate relationship that many contractors and owners have. And I've seen it on a lot of projects. They just have this fighting going back and forth all the time. So in this particular case, we were able to help reduce that with no claims. And
Amazing.
How many people can say that in this world, especially with COVID? We had a lot of personnel changes on our program and projects that were out there, and that just really helped with the skill set. It really helped bring in the people in. It helped to be nimble. It helped to, we have been talking about qualitative and quantitative studies and this and that, and the management styles and that. And I think we can talk about that too. But we were able to identify all the, even there was a lot of environmental hazards, really severe environmental, but also asbestos, also PCBs, also the things in the building. Because if you're renovating a building versus doing things outside, there are different things that you have to look at. And so in that case, we were able to really identify things and do things differently too. I mean, if you have to descope stuff, that's different than the normal thing, because nobody descopes. But if you have to continue with the project, you have to get some money, so you might as well think about descoping and things like that.
And it's so great having you, someone like you on board, because it's like you're the hawk with that eagle eye view where you can see like that 10,000 feet view of the project, whereas the construction management, they're in it, doing it on a day-to-day basis. And then the stakeholders are over here making decisions, like they're the ultimate decision makers on it. So you can be that person who can see it for the whole project and be able to help navigate things that these two sides can't necessarily see in their roles.
That's a good point. It's hard to have that one program manager that has the experience that can do it. So there's CCM, Certified Construction Manager, and you go through hell not taking the test because after years of experience, it's pretty easy. Construction Managed CMAs, Construction Management Association of America, really sponsors this CCM. And it's not, PE is also important, but having a PE and the CCM together is extremely important, just for the reasons you said. You have to know how to get into the detail, but you have to know when to pull your head up and be able to look at the big picture and to be able to explain it to the stakeholders, construction, the owner, whoever's managing the building or the project or the program, and just give that advice to them so they don't get both stressed out and spend too much money and have to go to Congress again. Nobody wants to go to Congress.
Nobody wants to do that.
Or to talk to them why they need more money, But if they do, they do. And then you give them the support to be able to do that.
Absolutely. This all comes down to the different management approaches and how you had mentioned to me off camera about the difference between qualitative and quantitative approach to these programs. Can you speak to that? What is quantitative versus qualitative, and then why both are important?
Yeah, no, you just this topic, as you know, I get really excited about. So the qualitative, and I did qualitative grounded studies where I'd interview people and do this. It's more of the soft skills, but there are other things involved here. We mentioned a few of the qualitative things that we did. But to begin with, let me just explain what quantitative is, and it has to do with numbers. It has to do with earned value management. And then earned value management describes the project. There's been so many things that say, hey, this technique, if you use it, will help your project. If you know how much you're producing and how much quantity and how much physical. Here's the numbers of dollar value of what you're doing this month. The next month you're going to predict what you're going to do, and next month or next year you're going to be able to do it. You can do this in the micro sense, which we've done and we've given classes on. It's really cool. Iprograms has done this, or you can do it in a macro. And a lot of people complain that these programs and projects aren't set out for earned value, but you can do that stuff. You just have to think about it in a different way in a macro. And I'll give you a good case. So we have a large program, Aviana 2000. We were like, hey, this is here's our schedule, and here's this. We were building a school amongst all the other ones, and this school project, the contractor was failing. And I said, if we continue doing this, and I didn't do it micro, I did macro. I was like, here's the big numbers, and I did this, and I said it's going to cost this much money, and it's going to be done on this date if you continue doing this. And they continued doing it. 3 years I came by the office. I had people there managing this construction, had schedulers there, and had a whole team there managing construction. And there were some challenges, but they finally decided to default the contractor, get him out of there, get somebody else in there. But it was very strange because they finished the same dollar value in the same time that I said 3 years before. And that's just a one case of 100 that you can mention. And then statistically, people just cannot, it's like magic, don't believe that it works, but it works. But anyway, that's a qualitative method, earned value. There's also, they call it critical path method. It's a scheduling. We use Primavera. I've taught in Primavera P6. It's an extremely qualitative or quantitative way of approaching a project. The critical path is the critical path. What is important? What has to go through the project? What has to be done on the program before, after, and this and that. I've been involved in big programs, large programs where you have the designer record going out, doing this huge, here's your program, here's your here's all the buildings, here's all this infrastructure you need to do. And they map it all out, and then they're putting dates on buildings. They come to us to say, hey, let's do a schedule. So I put together a schedule. West Point was one of them. Aviana was another one, and NAS 1, NAS 2. I mean, there's a lot of program management scheduling that's qualitative type stuff that you do. But when you do it on a program level, you're looking at the qualitative aspects as well as the quantitative. So the quantitative is down to the numbers, but there's a mixture in there when you're doing this program stuff. You got to say, okay, here's our CPM schedule, but you also need to understand what it is that you're doing and how you're doing it and what the wiggle room is. All this qualitative things that go into making a quantitative schedule. Hopefully I didn't confuse you. And then you have your key performance indexes, and there's a lot of matrix and things that you do on your programs. How long does it take you to do a change order? How long does it take you to do a submittal or an RFI? All those things have to do with quantitative. So the qualitative aspect, and we've spoke about it recently, is risk management. A lot of the engineers that I get involved with, they want to get into the numbers and they want to say risk management. That's it. Risk management, and then stakeholder engagement and communication. That is qualitative stuff. Although you can kind of put some numbers to everything, and I think you should. As an engineer, yeah, it's great because you can understand it a little better. And then once you have a couple of numbers, then qualitatively people kind of begin to understand that, hey, you're going over budget or something.
How do you know if you are doing well in qualitative management?
How many arguments do you have? How many change orders do you have that are contiguous, that are going to go to claims? I've gone and been involved in large programs and just go to different projects, Jamaica, North-South Highway, or some of these other bigger programs in Qatar and other places in Africa. You understand what it is right off the bat. If you understand qualitative aspects of it and the quantitative, you understand when you're just need to sit back and have that partnering session. And many of the people I work with don't like that, and it's a mandate from the Congress and from the U.S. government side that you have to have program partnering sessions if it's a larger project or program. So it is something that you'll understand. And partnering sessions are all about quantitative or qualitative stuff. Also quantitative, mostly qualitative. Here's how we get along. Here's how we communicate. Here's how we reduce the risks. Here's how we do things. Yeah.
Do you know why there is such an aversion to doing qualitative?
Well, we usually in the partnering sessions have personality kind of traits that we look at.
Myers-Briggs.
Yeah. You've done it before, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah. And, I'm an extrovert, but I'm an engineer. Most of the people I work with are introverts. They just don't. It's like pulling teeth sometimes of getting them out, and then getting along with a lot of introverts. I've done it. I like it. I'm there. Been in this industry a while, but it is challenging to get them to communicate. And if you can't get people to communicate and they're in their own little world, especially if you work on projects that involve scientists or doctors, they think differently as well.
Right.
You really figure it out, and that's
right.
The challenge I think with that.
So tackling all of this in the beginning and creating the structure for effective communication and team management early on and setting a standard. I taught in a high school classroom for 7.5 years, and I knew how important it was to, when I come into the classroom, to have standards and procedures right at the beginning versus saying, okay, let's see how all of this rolls.
Yeah.
And so setting that up in the beginning, the communication piece goes hand in hand with the qualitative approach that you take in management. Yes?
Yeah.
And doing it at the beginning, I know as a teacher, if I set out all of my rules and all of the things that we would be doing, scheduling and everything in the beginning. And they knew that they were going to come to these meetings and we were going to communicate with each other and all of that right in the beginning. It was no hassle. But if I asked them to come after school, all of a sudden on a Tuesday night, they're not going to want to do that. Or, hey, do you want to meet next week? The kids already have all of these other things that they're doing. And so I can't just ask them next week to.
So you've touched on two things that we really, really think are important in management world. The first thing is, hey, you pretty much learn all this stuff in high school and in junior high school and elementary school from your mother, of how to talk to people and how to get along and how to work with people. I mean, in high school, yeah, you get it. You got to make sure you do that on your larger project and programs. And the other thing is that we're a group and an entity that in construction and program management, we've done this for a while. We know what we're doing. Nobody can tell us what we can do better. I mean, that attitude is out there, and we need to learn from other industries like the education industry. We need to learn from even, submariners who are managing nuclear power ships. How do they do that? How do they manage such nuclear weapons, and how do they get involved? That's a program. That thing is huge. How are they so successful? Why can they do it in the Navy, specifically on submarines, better than they do? Well, you can't say better. They just do it differently. There's less resources, less people managing those nuclear powered submarines than there are in the Air Force managing other similar type of thing, but it's land based. So why is it? There's got to be a difference there, and we have to learn from it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've gone over today the 5 largest challenges for programs. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we go?
Yeah, technology has changed our world in both doing program management, construction management, and working in every industry. So there are applications out there. There are different technology that are out there, and I believe there are other people talking about the technologies that are there. There are databases. When we talk about databases, we in our industry, it's usually a construction management information system or program management information systems. Those are all really good things to have, and those are tools that we need to use. But it's not standardized. I don't think it will be in the next 20, 30 years. But there are good tools out there that are going to change our industry. There are good cameras. I think the Q had a podcast on a 360-degree camera that we could probably mention here. Procon's a great company. I've worked with them. I support them in any way, shape, or form. And they gave a really good podcast on something that technically driven that will help the industry. We need more of that. We don't need less of it. We need more of the qualitative type studies out there, hopefully qualitative grounded studies that will help improve the projects and programs. But yeah, that's another aspect of it, that technology is something that I think we can't avoid, especially for AI and ChatGPT and all the things that we're doing in our company here.
I can't wait to dive more into each of these elements on our next episode, and we will see you later. Did you enjoy that episode? Dr. Bill and I sure do hope so. Don't forget, like and share on YouTube. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll delve into the remaining challenges. Until then, remember, master the art and achieve great outcomes.
It's a long way home, thinking about that city of charm.